CMTG Munster, your place for Commander games every Monday and Thursday. Goblin approved.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Alright. This week we're back at Family Fun Hobbies playing a game of EDH. I am playing Daretti, and I keep Thespian Stage, Archer of Razka, Solemn Simulacrum, Arcane Lighthouse, Vandal Blast, and Sequestered Stash. Trevor is playing his Atraxa deck and keeps a Command Tower, a Plains, an Opulent Palace, a Sunken Hollow, Thematic Compass, Freyalise, and Gideon, Alab's Zendikar. Matt is taking Temmet out for a spin, keeping Land Tax, Enlightened Tutor, Serum Visions, Rapid Hybridization, Port Town, Island, and a Prairie Stream. Lastly, Judge Pat is playing his Stangg deck, and it's based around a theme, so maybe you'll find it and let me know in the comments. He keeps a Sword of Light and Shadow, Tooth and Claw, Rack and Ruin, 2 mountains, a forest, and a mirror pool. Pat wins the die roll, and he starts us off. Pat plays a mountain and passes. I play a Thespian Stage, and I pass. Matt plays a Port Town, revealing an island from his hand, and he passes. Trevor plays a tapped Opulent Palace, and he passes. Pat plays a forest, and he passes. I play a tapped Valakut, passing. Matt plays an island, and he casts Land Tax. He then casts Serum Visions, and resolving his scry on Trevor's turn. Trevor plays a Plains, and he casts Thematic Compass. Pat plays a forest, and we see Sword of Light and Shadow. I play Sequestered Stash as my land for turn, and I pass. Matt uses his Land Tax trigger, and he finds 3 basics, and draws for turn. He plays an Evolving Wilds, and moving to his end step, discards down to 7, and cracks his wild to find a basic. Trevor plays a Wooded Foothills, taking 1 as he cracks it to go and find a Shockland. Pat plays another mountain, and he casts Oracle of Moldiah, revealing the top card of his library. Pat then plays a tapped Mirror Pool, and he passes to me. I play an Archer of Razka, and I cast Solemn Simulacrum. I go and find a basic, and I pass. At the end of my turn, Trevor activates his Compass to go and find a basic. Matt finds 3 basics on his upkeep thanks to Land Tax, and he plays a Prairie Stream in his main phase, which comes in untapped because he has 2 basics. Matt then drops a Trading Post before discarding down to 7. Trevor plays a Command Tower, and he casts Gideon, Alab's Zendikar. He uses Gideon's ability to make a 2/2 Knight token, and he passes to Pat. Pat equips the Oracle with his Sword of Light and Shadow, and he swings it at Matt for 4. Pat gains 3 life, but can't return any creatures, and he passes. I draw, and I play an Arcane Lighthouse as my land for turn. I then cast a Combustible Gearhulk, and I target Pat with the Enter the Battlefield trigger. He decides to let me draw 3, and I do so, passing to Matt. Matt uses his Land Tax trigger once more, grabbing 3 more of his lovely matching basics. He plays a Plains in his main phase, and he casts Elspeth, Knight Errant, using her plus ability to make a 1/1 soldier token. Trevor casts Atraxa in his main phase before dropping a Temple of Deceit. He scries 1, and he keeps it on top. He then upticks Gideon, but passes through his combat step, and he moves to his end step. At the end of turn, Trevor uses Atraxa's Proliferate to add another loyalty counter to Gideon. Before moving to his turn though, Pat casts Risk and Ruin to destroy Trevor's Compass and my Gearhulk. Pat draws for turn, and he moves through his steps to a second main phase. He casts a 2-headed giant, and then passes to me. I play a mountain in my main phase, and I bring out Daretti. I then move to cast a Wheel of Fortune, and Matt responds by casting an Enlightened Tutor with the spell in the stack. He goes to find a Hammer of Nazan, and he puts it on top of his library. We all discard our hand in the meantime, and once the wheel is done, I downtick Daretti, swapping the Solemn Simulacrum for my Darksteel Forge. I also get to draw thanks to the Solemn Dying. Matt is still able to use his Land Tax trigger, and grabs another 3 basics on his upkeep. He plays a Plains in his main phase, and he then plays the Hammer, equipping it onto his Soldier token. Matt then upticks Elspeth, gaining another Soldier token, and he passes to Trevor while discarding down to 7. Trevor casts a Nissa Vital Force in his main phase, and he upticks her to animate one of his lands. He plays a Yavimaya Hollow as his land for turn, and moving to combat, Atraxa takes out Daretti. He gains 4 life as well. Moving to his end step, he proliferates and adds a counter to all of his planeswalkers. Pat plays a forest, and he casts Zendikar Resurgent. He then moves to combat, and he swings the Oracle and the Giant at me. He rolls instead of the coin flips, and he gets 2 odds, which we've decided is 2 tails, and the giant gets double strike. I then take 12, which is fine I guess, and Pat gains 3 life, and still can't return a creature. I cast a Chaos Wand in my main phase, which is a new addition thanks to speaking with Guerte, who's kind of an expert on Daretti. Matt plays an island for his turn, and he casts a Batter Skull. He gets to equip it onto the soldier token for free thanks to the hammer, and he upticks Elspeth again to gain another soldier token. Moving to combat, Matt swings the geared up soldier at Pat for 7 and gains 7 life from lifelink. Trevor downticks Nissa and uses her ultimate, gaining an emblem that draws him a card whenever he plays a land. Trevor then plays a forest and he draws a card. He then casts Farseek and finds a hollowed fountain which comes in tapped and triggers the emblem. With the draw trigger on the stack, I activate my Chaos Wand and target Trevor. He reveals until he hits Wrath of God, which I'm happy to cast. Trevor then draws from the emblem trigger, and he makes another Knight token from Gideon. He then casts an Oath of Jace, drawing 3 and discarding 2, and passes to Pat. Pat plays a mountain and drops Arlen Cord, and then Samut the Tested. He uses Arlen's ability to make a 2/2 wolf, and he flips his walker. He also upticks Samut to give the wolf double strike, and he puts the sword into the wolf's mouth and passes to me. I play a mountain for my land for turn, and I drop a Blood Moon to slow down Trevor. I then drop Chandra Flamecaller and use her 0 ability to discard my hand and draw that many cards plus 1. Matt is still able to use his land tax trigger again and grabs 3 more basics and draws for turn. He plays a Plains and he brings out a Reform. Matt then casts a Steel Shaper's Gift and he goes to find a Bloodforged Battle Axe, which he then casts and equips onto the soldier with the hammer. Matt then upticks Elspeth and makes another soldier token. Moving to combat, Matt swings the Captain America of tokens at Pat Samut, but Pat casts the Gone part of Dead and Gone to bounce the token back to Matt's hand. Trevor gets to scry 2 thanks to his Oath of Jace, and he casts an Oath of Nissa, and suddenly my Blood Moon doesn't do a heck of a lot. He then plays a Bloodstained Mire, which has him draw a card as it comes in, and he drops a Soul Ring. Trevor then casts Vraska the Unseen, and downtakes her to blow up Blood Moon. He then cracks the Mire, taking 1 to go and find a basic swamp, shuffling, and then drawing from the emblem once more. He then pays 4 life to the Phyrexian symbols of Norn's Annex, and he upticks Nissa, targeting the Opulent Palace once more. He makes another Knight token with Gideon, and he passes to Pat. Pat plays a Thespian Stage as his land for turn. He then upticks the flipped Arlen to give the wolf token +1/+1 in trample, and then upticks Samut to give it double strike. He swings it at Elspeth, and Matt puts the Reform in front of the wolf to start to get the bigger tokens going. Elspeth sadly still dies to the rest of the trample damage. In Pat's second main phase, he casts Stangg and gets a token. I cast a Soul Ring in my main phase and then tap the Soul Ring and 3 lands to cast a Gilded Lotus. I then pretty much tap out to cast Saheeli's Directive, where X is 7. I reveal the top 7, hitting Rings of Brighthearth, Arcbound Ravager, some lands, Chaos Warp, Karn, and Oracle's Vault. I put the artifacts onto the field and the rest into the bin. I then use Chandra's 0 ability, discarding my hand and drawing that many +1. Matt uses his land tax trigger once more, grabbing some basics and putting them to his hand. He plays an island, and he casts Saheeli's Artistry. He makes a copy of my Gilded Lotus and my Karn. Matt then taps his token Lotus and some lands to cast Stolen Identity, and makes a token copy of my Darksteel Forge. They say mimicry is the sincerest form of flattery, but Matt had better get his own darn copies of these cards. He ciphers the sorcery onto Karn, and he then passes turn. Trevor scries 3 thanks to the Oath of Jace, and he puts 1 on top and the rest on the bottom. He plays a Flooded Strand, drawing from the emblem, and he cracks it, taking 1 to go and find Temple Garden, taking 2 more to have it come in untapped, and he draws from the emblem again. He casts an Oath of Fairy, and exiles his Oath of Jace until end of turn, and then moves to resolve an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. Pat floats 12 mana as we return all of our non-land permanents back to our hand. Trevor then upticks Vraska twice, and makes an emblem with Gideon. He then upticks Nissa twice, and he upticks Gideon once. Moving to combat, Trevor swings everything at me, and I take the hit, dropping to 4. Trevor then moves to his end step, returning the Oath of Jace to the field, drawing 3 and discarding and passing to Pat. Pat recasts the Zendikar Resurgent in his main phase, and he recasts Arlen Cord, and he makes a wolf and flips her, then passes to me. I play an Urza's Power Plant, and I recast Soul Ring and then Rings of Brighthearth. I then drop a Basalt Monolith, which as many EDH players know, can combo with the rings to make infinite colorless, which I just so happen to do. I then drop everything that Trevor had bounced back to my hand, and with my field refilled, I activate my Chaos Wand and copy the ability with my Rings of Brighthearth. I target Trevor, and he reveals a Path of Exile off the top of his library. I don't really want to exile one of his land creatures since it'll just find him another land, plus draw him a card, so I leave it in exile, and we do it again. He reveals until he hits Heroic Intervention, which I also leave in exile. I finish my turn by activating my Oracle's Vault, putting a brick counter onto the artifact, and exile Unwinding Clock, which I then cast from exile. I pass to Matt. I untap on Matt's untap, and in his main phase, he wipes the board with a Phyrexian Rebirth. He ends up getting a 5/5 colorless horror token, and Matt then recasts the hammer into Zahn and puts it onto the horror. At the end of Matt's turn, I make infinite colorless mana once more with the rings and the monolith combo, and I then activate the vault, copying the ability with rings. I exile 2 cards and put 2 brick counters on the vault. I then activate my Chaos Wand and copy the ability with the rings, but this time I target Pat. I hit what I think is Nissa's Pilgrimage, which does a whole lot of nothing for me, and I then hit Twin Bolt, which I have deal 1 damage to Gideon and 1 to Nissa. I untap with Trevor, and Trevor scries 3. He puts them on the bottom, and he draws for turn. He plays a Mystic Gate, drawing from the emblem. He then floats 1 mana and upticks Nissa, untapping a land, and then downticks her to return Doubling Season to his hand. He then casts it, and with the spell in the stack, I make my infinite mana, and use the mana, and activate the wand, and copy the wand's activation, and target Trevor with both copies. I'm hoping to hit a counter, and the first spell I hit is Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, which I leave in exile. Trevor then reveals Seasons Past, which I'm actually happy to cast, but unfortunately it's not a counter. I grab a bunch of cards from my library, and the Doubling Season then resolves. Trevor then casts an Ob Nixilis Reignited, and downticks the Walker for his ultimate, and puts an emblem on me that has me take 2 damage whenever a player draws a card. Trevor then upticks Ob Nixilis, losing 1 life, and drawing a card which has me losing 2. He then activates Gideon's Zero ability twice, and at the end of Trevor's turn, I discard a card with my trading post to gain 4 life. I lose 2 life as Pat draws a card for turn, and Pat downticks Arlen Cord to deal 3 damage to Gideon, which has her transform. He then recasts Samut and downticks her, dealing enough to take out Nissa and 1 to Vraska. Pat then recasts Stangg and draws a card from the Resurgent trigger, which deals 2 to me. Pat then casts a Harrow, sacrificing a mountain, and grabs 2 basics. He casts a Sword of Fire and Ice, and he passes to me. At the end of turn, I activate the wand and I copy it with the rings, but this time target Matt. I also discard a card to my trading post, so I won't die when I draw a card on my turn. Matt first hits Crush of Tentacles, which I leave in exile, and his second spell is Counterspell, which would have been great for the Doubling Season. I draw for turn and I take 2. I then activate my Vault, after making infinite mana of course, and I hit Ugin and a land. I get to cast Ugin for free, which isn't really that big of a deal with all of my mana, and I downtick my Planeswalker by -6. I then drop my Blightsteel Colossus, and then using Karn, turn all of my non-creature artifacts into creatures, and I swing them at Trevor for lethal. In my second main phase, I then cast a Spine of Ishsa, and have it blow up Pat's Zendikar Resurgent. Matt draws, and I lose 2 life, and Trevor reveals he was about to draw Chain Veil, which would have been bad for the table. Matt then recasts his Batterskull, and gets to equip it onto the Horror for free. And he drops the Bloodstained Battle Axe, and does the same. Matt then casts Temmet, and he puts the combat trigger on his Horror. At this point, I realize it's coming at me, so I activate the wand once more, and I copy its ability. Matt reveals until he hits a Mystical Tutor, and I cast it, and I quickly realize Chaos Warp is actually in my graveyard. Matt then resolves the second ability, and he shows a Swan Song. Unfortunately, this doesn't save me, and I die in the combat step. Pat draws, and Matt realizes he should have another Axe token, which should have equipped to the Horror. Pat then casts an Explosive Vegetation, and finding 2 basics, passes back to Matt. Matt draws for turn, and he casts Umezawa's Jitte, sticking it onto the Dozen-Armed Horror, which is actually kind of freaky if you think about it. He then drops a Sublime Archangel, and moves to combat. He puts the trigger on the Horror, and Pat gets ready to take some damage. Before declare attackers though, Pat casts Struggle, targeting the Angel, and copies it with his Increasing Vengeance to deal the damage to Temmet as well. And Matt swings the Horror at Pat, who takes 16, and Matt gains as much. Pat then draws for turn, and realizing he can't do anything, concedes to Matt. Game review time! So, congratulations are in order to Matt for finally winning with his Temmet deck. I know he's worked really hard on it, so it's great to see it finally pay off. I think his strategy of holding back a lot of his equipment and not overcommitting to the board, he was able to chip away at opponents and help take them out, and once there were fewer opponents, he was able to put the pedal to the metal. Trevor's Atraxa deck is as mean as I remember it, and what really impressed me was the fact that he was able to use Nissa Vital Force's ultimate the turn after he cast it. He's also begun to bling out the deck, and you might see that he's running a lot of expeditions, inventions, and promo cards. The theme to Judge Pat's deck is the number 2, and as weird as it sounds, I have to admire him for really sticking to the theme. It forced him to run some interesting cards like Twin Bolt, which allowed him to do 2 damage split up among 2 targets, or say Samut the Tested, which allowed him to give Double Strike, meaning it dealt damage twice. Even the equipment, the Swords of Fire and Ice and Light and Shadow, did 2 different things, and it increased his creature's power and toughness by +2/+2. As I mentioned, I've been recently speaking to a lot of players who've been playing Daretti to help bring my deck up to speed, and I have to say, I'm not disappointed with what I've seen. I'm particularly fond of Chaos Wand, which I can agree probably isn't the strongest card in the deck, but I really enjoy the random nature of it. I just like the fact that I'm able to steal instants and sorceries from my opponent, and it tickles me that I run it in a red deck. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.